That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him again and again and again.
When Eddie Van Halen passed away, the rock music world was gripped by grief. Fans remembered him as the unique voice of a man who played a crucial role in Van Halen's success, but was left in silence all alone at the end. In a wave of mourning, Michael Anthony finally spoke out, but what he said was much more than just a tribute to his former bandmate Van Halen. Revealed things he never said. Over the years, the tensions within the band, moments hidden behind the glamour and hidden struggles that were never made public. His words shocked fans. Their relationship was more complicated than we always thought. The truth of those years has finally come to light, and it could forever change the way the world views Eddie Van Halen's. Eddie Van Halen, born on January 26, 1955, in Amsterdam, Netherlands, quickly became one of the most influential guitarists in the history of rock music. His family moved to the United States when Eddie was just a child, settling in Pasadena, California. Raised in a musical family, Eddie and his older brother Alex developed an early passion for music. Eddie's father, Jan, was a skilled clarinet player, and his brother Alex played drums, which naturally led to Eddie's early exposure to various instruments. Initially, Eddie played the drums, but soon switched to guitar, captivated by the sounds of rock legends like Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton. In the mid-1000s, 970s, Eddie's musical journey took a significant turn when he formed Van Halen with his brother Alex, bassist Michael Anthony, and vocalist David Lee Roth. Their energetic performances and unique sound quickly gained them a following. Eddie's innovative guitar playing, characterized by lightning-fast picking, complex riffs, and the revolutionary tapping technique, set the band apart from others in the burgeoning hard rock scene. In 1978, Van Halen released their self-titled debut album, which instantly put them on the map. The record featured tracks like Runnin' with the Devil and Eruption, a groundbreaking guitar solo that showcased Eddie's unparalleled technical skill. This album marked the beginning of a career that would redefine rock guitar and cement Eddie Van Halen as a legendary figure in music. Eddie Van Halen's journey to musical stardom began long before his name became synonymous with groundbreaking guitar work and explosive rock performances. In the mid-970s, Eddie, his brother Alex, and their bandmates, bassist Michael Anthony and vocalist David Lee Roth, came together to form the band Van Halen. From the very start, Eddie's guitar playing was the centerpiece of the band, as his unique sound, blending fast picking, complex riffs, and intricate techniques, distinguished them from every other rock act of the time. Michael Anthony, who would become Van Halen's bassist, was introduced to Eddie and Alex through mutual acquaintances in Pasadena. Eddie and Alex, having been musicians for most of their lives, were on the lookout for the perfect rhythm section to complete their lineup. Michael Anthony, who had been playing bass in local bands, was quickly drawn to the Van Halen brothers' raw energy and determination to make it big. His solid bass lines and high vocal harmonies perfectly complemented Eddie's blistering guitar solos, forming the foundation of Van Halen's iconic sound. In the early days of Van Halen, the band played local venues, honing their skills and gaining a following. They played with relentless passion and energy, often leaving audiences in awe with their electrifying performances. For Michael Anthony, this period was exciting but also a challenge. As a new member of a band with such a distinct sound, he was eager to fit in and contribute his talents, but he also had to learn how to balance the overpowering presence of Eddie's guitar with his own role in the band. Despite this, Anthony was always enthusiastic about their growing success and spoke fondly of the time they spent together, both on stage and behind the scenes. In interviews, Michael has often described Eddie as a musical genius, admiring not only his technical ability, but also his intense passion for creating music. Michael Anthony recalled their early days with fondness, emphasizing how Eddie's enthusiasm and energy were contagious. He described Eddie as someone who constantly pushed the band forward, challenging each member to be better and to strive for perfection. In interviews, Michael explained that the band's chemistry was unlike any other he had experienced. Eddie's innovative ideas, combined with Alex's solid drumming and Michael's steady bass lines, created a perfect synergy. It was magic, Anthony has said about those early years. We were all in sync, and Eddie was the driving force. He had a vision, and we were all on board with it. However, Michael Anthony has also admitted that despite the undeniable talent and vision that Eddie brought to the band, there were aspects of his personality that created tension, especially as Van Halen rose to fame. Eddie, being a perfectionist, had high expectations for everyone, which could sometimes come off as demanding and difficult to deal with. His fierce dedication to the music often translated into a lack of patience, and he could be harsh in his criticism of others. As the band's success skyrocketed, Eddie's intensity and perfectionism only grew stronger. While Michael Anthony acknowledges that Eddie's drive was a major factor in Van Halen's success, he also points out that Eddie's passion sometimes led to conflict. One of the most notable qualities that Michael Anthony describes about Eddie is his all-or-nothing approach to music and life. Eddie's relentless work ethic, while inspiring, could sometimes be overwhelming, especially for bandmates who were trying to balance their personal lives with the constant pressure of being in one of the world's most famous rock bands. According to Michael, Eddie could be unpredictable, at times being the life of the party, and at other times shutting people out and focusing entirely on the music. While this duality was part of what made Eddie Van Halen a legendary musician, it also created a more challenging dynamic within the band. Eddie's temper was another issue that arose, particularly during times when the band was facing external pressures such as record deadlines or internal disagreements. According to Michael, Eddie could sometimes lose his cool and act impulsively, which led to heated arguments and moments of tension within the group. Michael recalls a few instances where Eddie's frustration with the band's direction or outside pressures led him to make quick, rash decisions that weren't always in the band's best interest. Despite this, Michael stresses that Eddie's dedication to the music was never in question, but his emotional volatility could cause stress for those around him. Yet, even with these flaws, Michael Anthony remained incredibly loyal to Eddie and the band. He recognized that Eddie's complicated personality was a reflection of his intense passion for the music they were creating together. While Eddie's temperament could sometimes be difficult, Michael views these moments as part of the larger picture of their success. "I think we all have our moments," Michael has said, "and I always respected Eddie's commitment to the music, even if sometimes he could be tough to work with. But that's what made us who we are." The complex relationship between Michael Anthony and Eddie Van Halen highlights both the highs and the challenges of being in a band that revolutionized rock music. The two had a deep respect for each other musically, but like any close relationship, it was marked by both moments of unity and tension. Eddie's genius was undeniable, but as Michael Anthony points out, his temper and perfectionism added layers of complexity to their dynamic. Still, despite the conflicts and difficulties, their bond as bandmates remained strong, and Michael Anthony continues to speak fondly of the time he spent with Eddie in Van Halen. Michael's reflections on Eddie Van Halen remind us that even the most legendary musicians are not without their flaws. It is often these imperfections that make their contributions to music all the more remarkable, as they push their creative boundaries while navigating personal and professional challenges. Eddie Van Halen's legacy is built not only on his extraordinary talent, but also on the passion, perseverance, and yes, even his struggles that defined both him and the band. The story of Michael Anthony's departure from Van Halen is one filled with complex emotions, hidden tensions, and a clash of personalities that, over the years, have come to define much of the band's history. While Van Halen, especially Eddie Van Halen, is remembered for its incredible contributions to rock music, it's essential to acknowledge the darker side of this journey. One that wasn't always apparent to fans, but one that played a pivotal role in the unraveling of a band that revolutionized hard rock. The rise of Van Halen to global fame wasn't without its internal struggles, and Michael Anthony's exit from the band, along with the tensions that led to it, offers an intimate look at the challenges that often go unnoticed in the world of rock and roll. Eddie Van Halen, a musical genius who transformed guitar playing and became an iconic figure in rock history, was also a deeply complicated individual. As the creative force behind the band, he was the engine driving Van Halen's success. His incredible technical skills and pioneering guitar techniques laid the foundation for the band's unique sound. However, as the years went on, Eddie's increasing perfectionism and volatile temper began to strain relationships within the band. The early days of Van Halen, when the band was united by youthful enthusiasm and the drive to make it big, gave way to increasing tension as fame, ego, and personal struggles began to take their toll. Michael Anthony, the band's steady and dependable bassist, was at the heart of this dynamic. He had always been a calming presence in the group, providing solid bass lines and strong vocal harmonies that complemented Eddie's fiery guitar work. His role in the band, however, was often overlooked, and he found himself on the receiving end of Eddie's frustrations. As Van Halen grew in popularity, so did Eddie's tendency to take full control of the band's direction, both musically and personally. His behavior became more erratic, and the rest of the band, especially Michael, felt the pressure. One of the most significant factors in Michael's eventual departure was the growing tension with Eddie over creative control. Eddie, known for his relentless pursuit of perfection, often clashed with Michael over the direction of the band. Michael, who had been a loyal and supportive bandmate, started to feel sidelined in a band that he had helped build. As Eddie became more consumed with his own vision, he grew increasingly dismissive of Michael's contributions. The creative chemistry that had once made Van Halen's music so groundbreaking began to fray as Eddie's personal demons took over. Another critical factor was Eddie's treatment of his bandmates, especially during the later years of Van Halen's career. Michael Anthony has publicly acknowledged that Eddie's behavior became increasingly difficult to deal with. His perfectionism, which once fueled the band's success, became a source of constant tension. Eddie's inability to accept anything less than his own high standards led to numerous arguments, particularly when it came to the band's songwriting and recording process. As the frontman of the band, Eddie's vision became the sole driving force, and this often left the other members, including Michael, feeling like they had little say in the direction the band was taking. Michael Anthony has described Eddie's attitude as controlling, stating that it became clear that the band was no longer a collaborative effort, but rather a project dominated by Eddie. Despite his obvious talent and contributions, Michael found himself being pushed further and further into the background. The relationship between the two had become strained, and Michael began to feel more like a hired hand than an equal member of Van Halen. The final straw came during the recording of 1984, the album that would propel Van Halen into the stratosphere of rock stardom. Despite the album's commercial success, tensions were at an all-time high. Michael's role in the creative process was minimal, and he felt the weight of Eddie's criticism more than ever. According to reports, Eddie began to alienate Michael, particularly when he started making decisions about the band's sound without consulting him. Eddie's increasing reliance on synthesizers and more experimental sounds did not sit well with Michael, who was more focused on the band's core rock sound. As the band prepared for the 1984 tour, Eddie's behavior continued to alienate his bandmates. Michael was often left out of discussions about the band's future, and it became clear that Eddie was increasingly isolating himself from the rest of the group. The growing divide between Eddie and Michael became evident to everyone in the band, and tensions reached a boiling point. Michael was no longer content with being pushed aside, and he eventually realized that the band he had helped create was no longer the same. Eddie's personal struggles, including his battles with addiction, also played a significant role in the deterioration of his relationships with his bandmates. His erratic behavior, fueled by substance abuse and an overbearing desire for control, began to take a toll on his physical and emotional health, as well as on the health of the band. Michael, who had always been a steady presence in the group, struggled to deal with Eddie's instability. As Eddie's mood swings became more frequent, Michael found it increasingly difficult to maintain the camaraderie that had once defined Van Halen. It wasn't long before Michael made the difficult decision to leave Van Halen. After years of enduring Eddie's toxic behavior and feeling marginalized, Michael left the band in 1985. While the official reason for his departure was never fully explained, it was clear that Eddie's treatment of Michael played a significant role in his decision to leave. In interviews, Michael has admitted that his time with Van Halen had become untenable, and the decision to part ways with the band was a painful but necessary one. Michael went on to have a successful career with Sammy Hagar in the supergroup Chickenfoot, and later with Hagar in Van Halen's reunion lineup. But for many, his departure from the band marked the end of an era. Eddie Van Halen's treatment of Michael Anthony serves as a cautionary tale about the pressures of fame and the damaging effects of unchecked ego and addiction. Eddie's genius as a guitarist is unquestioned, but his personal struggles and volatile personality created a toxic environment that drove away one of the band's original members. Michael Anthony's departure was a painful chapter in Van Halen's history, and it marked the beginning of a long period of turmoil within the band. Though Eddie's talent continued to shine, the fractured relationships within the band, especially with Michael, would forever impact the group's dynamic and legacy. The story of Van Halen's dynamic, especially in the context of Michael Anthony's departure, has always been shrouded in controversy. As the band continued to evolve and face internal struggles, the fans and music critics alike have been left wondering, what would happen next for Van Halen, particularly in the wake of all the turbulence surrounding Eddie Van Halen and his bandmates. With Eddie's tragic passing in 2020 and Michael Anthony's gradual distance from the group, Many theories have emerged about what might have been had the band continued to reunite, both musically and personally. In this extensive analysis, we will explore the possibilities for the future, with a particular focus on the evolving dynamics within the band, how things could have played out differently, and the perspectives of key figures in rock and metal circles regarding what they believe could have transpired in a healthier, more sustainable future for Van Halen. First, it's important to acknowledge the iconic legacy of Van Halen. The band had its golden years, where it redefined rock music, with records like Van Halen I, 1984, and Fair Warning. The band's impact on the rock scene is undeniable, and their chemistry was a perfect storm of technical brilliance, memorable songwriting, and larger-than-life personalities. However, as we delve into the theories regarding what might have been, we must also acknowledge the darker undercurrent of dysfunction, internal clashes, and instability that always seem to lurk just beneath the surface. For fans of Van Halen, the early days represented the pinnacle of hard rock. Eddie's revolutionary guitar playing, the powerhouse vocals of David Lee Roth, and the tight rhythm section provided by Michael Anthony and Alex Van Halen created a sound that was truly unique. The chemistry between Eddie and Michael, despite the later strains, was undeniable at the start. Their partnership created some of the most recognizable riffs in rock history. But as time wore on, the evolution of the band was anything but smooth. Eddie's descent into addiction, his obsessive perfectionism, and his relationship with his bandmates, especially Michael, became increasingly strained. With Michael's departure, the group's dynamic shifted dramatically. The music would never quite be the same again, despite the band's continued success with Sammy Hagar at the helm. Fans and critics were divided. Some praised the new direction, while others longed for the original Van Halen sound. But what if Michael had never left? What if the tension within the band had been resolved earlier? Would Van Halen have continued to dominate the rock scene, with the perfect balance of Eddie's guitar mastery, Michael's steady bass, and the vocal talents of either David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar? Would they have transitioned into the modern era without losing their iconic sound? These are the questions that fuel the theories about the band's potential trajectory. There's also the question of Eddie's increasing control over the band's direction. As the creative force behind Van Halen, Eddie had the final say on most matters, including the direction of their albums, their sound, and even their image. While this worked for a time, the personal rifts that began to emerge, particularly with Michael, suggest that Eddie's need for control ultimately worked against the band. Had Eddie been more willing to collaborate and trust his bandmates, would they have been able to weather the storm of personal differences? Many fans believe that if the band had embraced a more democratic approach, their longevity could have been secured. Eddie's own personal battles with addiction and his battle to balance perfectionism with maintaining relationships within the band caused a fracture that would never fully heal. From the perspective of Michael Anthony, it's clear that his relationship with Eddie had become increasingly strained as time wore on. Michael, known for his loyalty and professionalism, eventually found it impossible to continue in a band where he felt sidelined and unappreciated. Eddie's domineering nature and volatile temperament ultimately pushed Michael out of the band. However, Michael has often spoken fondly of his time in the band, remembering it as a time of excitement and camaraderie, until the tensions boiled over. The theories surrounding Michael's exit from Van Halen often revolve around the question of what could have been had Eddie and Michael mended their differences. Michael's departure marked a turning point in Van Halen's career. Would the band have continued to thrive with a more balanced relationship, or was the magic of the original lineup gone forever? The departure of Michael Anthony also led to questions about Eddie's future. Eddie had always been the driving force behind Van Halen, but without the original lineup in place, could the band continue to find success? While the band still saw some commercial success after Michael's departure, the fan base was never the same. The heart of Van Halen had been broken, and some fans couldn't reconcile the absence of Michael and the familiar chemistry that had once been present. Theories about what could have happened in a different reality are rife. Would Eddie have been able to evolve the sound of Van Halen without alienating his bandmates? Could he have embraced change while still keeping the original Van Halen spirit intact? One of the most significant aspects of this speculation lies in the idea of the band evolving in a way that was respectful to all members. The success of Van Halen was not solely due to Eddie's guitar playing, but to the dynamic between all the members. Michael Anthony's vocal harmonies were a key part of the band's sound, and his bass playing gave the music a distinct depth. If Eddie had nurtured this dynamic and allowed Michael more creative input, the band could have explored new directions while maintaining their iconic sound. In a world where Eddie's ego did not dominate the creative process, the band could have found new ways to remain relevant, collaborating with the next generation of musicians, while still drawing on their legendary past. Another aspect to consider in the theories about the band's future is the involvement of the remaining members after Eddie's passing. Alex Van Halen, who had always been an integral part of the band, was often seen as a silent observer in the wake of Eddie's death. While he supported the band's reunion efforts, it's unclear how much he would have contributed to the creative process without Eddie.